This series contains adult language and descriptions of graphic violence. Listener discretion is advised. Hello, and welcome to Death by Southwest. I am your host, Margot, and it feels weird to say this because it feels uber professional, but I am really trying on these Tuesday episodes to be more professional and true crime focused. I'm going to tell you right now, if you're watching this, you'll probably see me mess with this disc thing quite a bit. It really bothers me. It gets in the way, but I do believe that it helps cut down on some mouth sounds that people don't care for, which is completely understandable. So please forgive me if you're watching this and you see me messing with it. And that's it. That's all the chit chat I'm going to do. We are going to jump right in to a story today, a very twisted story, if I do say so myself. I mean, let's be honest, most of these are pretty twisted stories. I do say that quite a bit because this is true crime and it is a dark subject matter. But this one is really unsettling for a lot of reasons. One, that it starts off so normal. A teenage girl, a babysitting job, a late night check-in with a friend, and then nothing. She just vanishes. Now, if you are someone who really dislikes unsolved or unresolved cases, this is not one of them. It may sound like it's going to be, but it's not. There is a resolution to this case. So hopefully that will keep those people who don't like unresolved cases sticking around here for this. So the other thing that makes this case very disturbing is who ends up being responsible. The people that are victim today, Alexis Rasmussen, the people that Alexis trusted the most were the ones who actually ended up betraying her in the worst way possible. So let's dive into the murder of Alexis Rasmussen. Now, our story today takes place in a city called Ogden, and it's in northern Utah. It's about 10 miles east of the Great Salt Lake and 40 miles north of Salt Lake City. It lies at the base of the Wasatch Mountains. And I know that I've mispronounced that before and probably still am. So we've definitely had a case that either took place in Ogden or nearby. So it's at about 4,200 feet elevation, and the population in 2020, which now is feeling a little dated to me. I mean, we're in 2025, but that's the most recent population I could find is 87,000. It's the 8th largest city in Utah. And Ogden is recognized as one of Utah's oldest settlements. In 1846, trapper Miles Goodyear established Fort Buenaventura near the present-day city of Ogden. And then it was purchased by Mormon settlers in 1847 and initially named Brownsville, but then it was renamed Ogden in honor of Pete Skeen Ogden, a brigade leader for the Hudson's Bay Company who explored the region in the 1820s. I feel like we have a lot of cities in the Southwest must be hubs for railroads and for transportation because, wow, the screen just got so dark. I don't know what happened there. Because I feel like I say that a lot, and this is just another one. So due to its strategic location, Ogden became a significant railway hub in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The proximity of Ogden to the Wasatch Mountains means that there's a lot of outdoor activities here, recreational activities, ski resorts, such as Snow Basin and Powder Mountain. There's hiking, mountain biking, climbing, and Pineview Reservoir, located east of Ogden, is a destination for boating, fishing, and other water activities. Now, this is the most interesting thing to me that I found about Ogden. So when I was first looking it up, I read something that says Ogden boasts a rich cultural scene, and historic 25th Street, once known for its colorful past, is now a vibrant area featuring shops, restaurants, and galleries. And I thought, what colorful past? So I looked it up, and it does have a pretty colorful past. In its heyday, it was known for Historic 25th Street was known for bootlegging and speakeasies, brothels, and prostitution. Many of the buildings had underground tunnels leading to hotels and other businesses, which allowed for kind of discreet prostitution. There were opium dens and gambling halls, organized crime and violence with reports of shootouts, unsolved murders, and plenty of illegal dealings, in addition to corrupt law enforcement. Some say that police officers either looked the other way or participated in the activities. It was often called Notorious Two-Bit Street because of all the illicit businesses. It gained a reputation as a place where anything could be bought for the right price. And some say that during its peak, 25th Street was actually considered one of the most dangerous streets in the West. Al Capone reportedly avoided Ogden because he said it's too wild, even for him. And the secret underground tunnels, they didn't only allow for discreet prostitution, but they also allowed bootleggers and criminals to escape raids or transport illegal goods. The Berthana building was a famous dance hall and speakeasy and a major hub for illegal activity. And the unsolved murders that happened here and the disappearances just kind of added to the mystique. There were plenty of rumors that bodies were hidden in tunnels beneath the streets. In the mid 20th century, the area declined due to economic shifts, and then efforts were made to clean it up. So today, it's been transformed into a vibrant district with lots of restaurants, bars, art galleries, and locally owned shops. But they still managed to preserve kind of the rich, scandalous history, which I love. Many of the historic buildings have been restored, and some buildings even embrace the street's past with themed decor and ghost tours. And anytime I hear ghost tours, I think of Savannah, Georgia, which is one of my favorite places in the world. And the only place I think I've done a ghost tour, although I believe there are quite a few ghost tours here in Arizona, and all throughout the Southwest and all throughout the country, I'm sure, as well. So that is our history on Ogden. And now we are going to get to know the main character of our case today, our victim, Alexis Rasmussen. She was a 16-year-old girl from Ogden at the time of our story. She was born on January 24th, 1995, to Dawn and Kirk. They divorced at some point, and Dawn remarried Mike Miera, and that was Alexis's stepfather. Alexis had three siblings: Seth Rasmussen, Isabel Miera, and Dylan Moore. I do not know which marriages these siblings came from. And Alexis was described by her mom as being a look at me type of girl. She had a very large personality. She kind of drew everyone towards her and around her. Her mom lovingly said that Alexis was someone who could drive someone crazy, but have them laughing at the same time. Alexis was also very responsible. She helped her family out financially by babysitting for people in her neighborhood. Her aunt, Brittany Rudd, described her as someone who was smart, funny, loving, sarcastic, and very quick-witted. Alexis was very loyal to her friends and family and almost never spoke ill of anyone. And like many teenagers, like many 16-year-olds, Alexis was starting to kind of explore her own identity, figure out who she was. And this caused her to sometimes end up at odds with her mom, which is typical of teenagers. I don't have teenagers, so I'm not saying that from parenting experience. I'm saying that more from being a teenager, and I was a real pain in the ass, if I do say so myself. But despite the kind of typical teenage challenges, Alexis was still really close with her mom. So our story begins the night of September 10th, 2011. And on the evening of September 10th, 2011, Alexis was scheduled to babysit for Eric and Dee Millerberg, a couple that she had known and trusted, and they lived in North Ogden. Dee had been a family friend of Alexis's family. Alexis had babysat for Dee and Eric's two daughters on multiple occasions. And Dee and Eric's daughters were 5 years old and 9 months old. So the night started off pretty normal. Alexis went over to babysit. Dee and Eric left and went out. That's it. That's about all that I know about the night, but there was nothing of note, at least initially. Now at 10:20 p.m., surveillance video captures Dee Millerberg and Alexis picking up a prescription at Layton Walgreens. Dee leaves Alexis at home. They pick up this prescription at Walgreens. They go back to the Millerberg's house. Alexis stays to continue babysitting, and Dee goes back out to presumably resume her night with Eric Millerberg, her husband. I don't know why I said his last name there. At 11:30 p.m., now throughout the night, so prior to 11:30 p.m., throughout the night, Alexis's mom and her had been texting, and about an hour after Alexis got back from the pharmacy, 11:30 p.m., Alexis texted her mom, said, "I'm back home, still babysitting because the Millerbergs are out and they're probably going to be out late." Now, it wasn't clear why they went to the pharmacy. That was not determined at this point. And because it was getting so late, Alexis's mom said, "Why don't you just spend the night there? Make sure you get paid, but spend the night there." The Millerbergs said that that's not true, that Alexis actually left around 11:30 to go meet a friend. Around 12:30 a.m., Alexis exchanged text messages with a boy, and they were going to meet up, but the boy says that he never ended up meeting Alexis that night. And those messages that Alexis exchanged with this boy around 12:30 a.m., that's the last communication that anyone ever heard from Alexis. After that, there were no calls, no texts, no social media activity, which was, of course, alarming behavior for a 16-year-old girl who was pretty active on text, social media, etc. So the next morning when Dawn realized that Alexis still wasn't home, which, there was some confusion the night before. Alexis's mom told her to sleep there. It's unclear whether Alexis actually confirmed that and said, "Yes, I'm going to sleep here," or whether she left the Millerbergs and went to go meet a friend. But by morning, at a certain point, she's not home. So whether she stayed at the Millerbergs or whether she went to go meet a friend, she wasn't back home and her mom hadn't heard anything. So she thought, okay, well, maybe she did stay at the Millerbergs and then went to a friend's house. So her mom starts calling around, asking friends, "Have you seen her? Did she stay at your house last night?" Nobody seems to know where she is. So Alexis's mom, Dawn, thought, well, I'll go to the next reasonable place. Alexis isn't answering her phone. None of her friends know where she is. I'm going to go to where she was last seen, babysitting at the Millerbergs. So Dawn goes to the Millerberg home. Eric answered the door. And Dawn said that Eric was, quote, "all over the place. He was bobbing and weaving all over, jumping from one subject to the next." Ultimately, he told Dawn, Alexis isn't here. Dawn continues to try and call and text Alexis, but now her calls are going straight to voicemail. There is no activity on Alexis's Facebook, which she was very active on. There's no sign of her anywhere. So panic set in pretty quickly, and a missing persons report was filed pretty immediately. On that report, it listed that Alexis was last seen babysitting for the Millerbergs at their home at 3328 North 900 East on the night of September 10th. The community of Ogden really quickly kind of rallied together. They distributed flyers, organized search parties, and investigators got right on top of questioning family, friends, acquaintances. Now, family and friends acknowledged that Alexis had run away before, but when she had done it in the past, she usually kept in touch with family and friends. So this felt different. Nonetheless, police thought, well, she's run away before. We're going to initially treat this as a missing persons case, nothing more. As they're talking to people, as they're talking to friends and family over the, coming days, there were two names that kept popping up, Eric and Dee Millerberg. Now, as I'm reading this and researching this, I'm like, well, of course, duh. But that's where she was last seen. Those are the people who supposedly saw her last. She was babysitting that night. Of course, their names are going to keep popping up. So police didn't necessarily think anything of this at first, but they still wanted to talk to the Millerbergs in a more kind of formal capacity. So police spoke to Dee first, And Dee told police that Alexis had left their house late that night when they got home. Alexis left, but her story was kind of inconsistent. So first she claimed that Alexis left around midnight or maybe 12:30 and went to go meet a friend at an elementary school. Then she changed her story and said, "Well, no, Alexis went to go meet a drug dealer." Then she pretty much stopped talking altogether. So investigators who weren't necessarily suspicious at first, now because this story is not consistent, like right off the bat, they're suspicious. But they don't have anything more than just suspicion at this point. There's no body, there's no, you know, hard evidence indicating anything other than perhaps Alexis ran away. Now, on October, this sounds weird, 7th or 3rd, I don't know because I saw both dates quoted in my research, but the first week in October, basically, the Millerbergs were both arrested, but they were not arrested on anything having to do with Alexis's disappearance. So Alexis is still missing. She's missing a month now. Sorry, we jumped ahead a month because really nothing happened in that month except for the fact that she never came home. So her family is obviously very, very concerned. Lots of search parties went out, flyers everywhere. They were looking for her the whole time, but nothing, they didn't find anything and they found no evidence leading any which way, except for the conversation with the Millerbergs, which left investigators somewhat suspicious. So now we're at the first week in October, and the Millerbergs are arrested, but not because of Alexis. They are arrested on unrelated charges. However, they are still on investigators' radar as being potentially involved in Alexis's disappearance, which no shit. Like, how could they not be considered at this, like right away? I don't understand how they weren't considered people of interest, but they weren't. So Dee is arrested on an unrelated drug charge, and she's facing 2 charges of falsely obtaining and dispersing a prescription, which is a 3rd-degree felony. Eric was arrested for violating probation from a 2010 fraud case that involved forgery and unlawful use of an ATM card. And this happened after authorities say that he was found with heroin and Oxycontin, and he failed to report to his probation officer. Now, I don't have a lot of details on kind of, and I don't know about you, but this is where my head goes. When I found all this information, I was like, what? Like, how is somebody just found with heroin and Oxycontin? Was he pulled over? Did his probation officer find it? Well, no, because he failed to report to his probation officer. So this is taken directly from an article. It says prosecutors said Millerberg violated his parole on several occasions in recent weeks, using Oxycontin and failing to report for his required check-in with adult probation and parole. He also failed to complete a required substance abuse treatment program, according to court records. And this was after he admitted to using heroin. So was he arrested first and then he admitted that he was using heroin? He was arrested for not checking with his probation officer. I don't know. There's a few holes in this story, and this is one of them. I don't know how it all went down. All I know is that they were both arrested and arrested for separate things. The judge reinstated Eric's original sentence of up to 5 years in prison. So Eric is now in prison, but not for anything having to do with Alexis at this point. Because of these arrests and because they have young children, and I'm sure because of a multitude of other reasons, law enforcement searched the Millerbergs' home multiple times. Now, it was never clarified if these searches were strictly for the drug-related offenses or if they were also connected to the fact that Alexis was missing. So, media outlets, Alexis's family, us, we don't know what evidence they were looking for, if they were looking for evidence of something having to do with Alexis, or if this was just related to the drug charges. They both had separate drug charges. Excuse me. I promise I'm not having a stroke. So on October 18th, which is now over a month after Alexis has disappeared, police received a tip from a confidential informant about a possible gravesite. This tip led investigators to a remote area near a river approximately a mile off the Taggart exit in Morgan County, where they discovered a badly decomposed body. One of the state attorneys said it was off the roads a little way. It was an area you could definitely drive to, though. Any type of vehicle could have gotten there. It was near the river, but on the other side of the road from the river. It's possible it could have been discovered by somebody stumbling upon it, but that seemed a little bit unlikely. The state's attorney declined to say if the body was found above ground or in some type of shallow grave, but did say that it appeared the body had been in that location for some time. On October 19th, the medical examiner began the autopsy, and by October 22nd, the Utah State Medical Examiner's Office confirmed through fingerprint and dental records that the badly decomposed body found was, in fact, that of Alexis. And this, of course, confirmed her family and friends' worst fears, and it also intensified the investigation, which was no longer a missing person investigation. It was now going to be seen as a homicide investigation. So after this, the family put out a statement that said, "Our family has endured a catastrophe, one that has changed each of us in ways that are far beyond words. Life will never be the same. Now, sadly, we mourn for the loss of our baby girl. As a family, we will slowly try to heal, knowing we will never fully recover," which is heartbreaking. On Tuesday, October 25th, police finally named the Millerbergs as persons of interest. Not long after that, Dee Millerberg's attorney, Michael Buies, says that prosecutors plan to hit Dee Millerberg, 37 years old at the time, and her husband, Eric, who was 36 at the time, with homicide charges. Apparently, in that earlier search of their home, they searched the home on October 9th, police said they found traces of human blood in an area where some carpet had been removed. Furthermore, that confidential informant that called and tipped police off to where a body might be also told police, "Dee knows everything that happened. The girl is buried somewhere in the state. She's not gone, but she's not alive." So that was what that informant had told police when that informant called about the body. So the Weber County, sorry, I had said state's attorney, the Weber County attorney reiterated at this time that even though the Millerbergs were persons of interest and that Alexis's death was being treated as a homicide, it does not necessarily mean that she was murdered, which I think is an interesting distinction here. So the county attorney said, homicide charges come in varying degrees from negligent or accidental homicide to capital murder. And that is, I think that anybody who's listening to true crime is probably very familiar with that. However, it is easy to forget that when you hear homicide investigation, I mean, my mind at least is immediately going to it's murder. But it may be a negligent homicide, an accidental homicide. So let's see. This was something that I just found that was pretty interesting. About 2 weeks after Alexis went missing, Dawn said that she bumped into Dee and she thought it was a really odd interaction because Dee didn't even ask about Alexis. Like, they knew each other. Remember, Dee was a kind of a family friend of sorts. I don't know the context on that, but was some type of family friend. And so Dee and Alexis's mom run into each other. Alexis has been missing for 2 weeks. And Dee says nothing like, "Oh my God, how are you doing? I'm so sorry. Is there anything I can do?" Nothing. Doesn't even mention it. Really, really weird. And to me, that seems really guilty. Dawn, Alexis's mom, also said that, she had never met Eric Millerberg prior to her daughter's disappearance. So for whatever reason, Dee was friends with Alexis's family, but Eric was not. Alexis's mom said that when she did finally meet him, when she went to the house asking about Alexis, she said, "I had the most horrible feeling in the world." And she also said that if she had met Eric Millerberg beforehand, she would have never let Alexis babysit for them. Now, November 1st, search warrants indicate that friends of the Millerbergs thought that they were involved with the death of Alexis. Some of the Millerbergs' friends said that their house served as a crash pad for teenagers and that Alexis was using drugs with the Millerbergs when she was over there. So, this is another one of those holes. And I almost didn't do this story because of it. You'll have to let me know if I should have gone with that gut instinct or if it's okay to be telling this story with such a pretty big piece missing. To me, it seems like something, and I couldn't find it anywhere, but something is missing here. So Alexis goes to babysit at their house. Alexis never is seen again. She's missing. A month later, about a little bit over a month later, a tip comes in to police about where a body might be. There is a body there. It is Alexis's body. And then at some point, there were some search warrants that police had to speak to the Millerbergs' friends, and the Millerbergs' friends said Alexis was using drugs with them, and other teens were staying at their house, which is super weird. They have two young daughters. They're grown, almost 40-year-old adults. Why are teenagers sleeping at your house? That's weird. However, I don't know how police, now Eric's already in jail for the drug charges. D was arrested, but did not spend time in jail, I don't believe. So I feel like there's something missing between, okay, there's some weird information about these people. This is the last place she was seen. But now they're arrested. They're going to be charged. They're going to be hit with homicide charges. I just feel like something was skipped over and not by me, but by the media, perhaps, because I couldn't really find, no matter how deeply I looked, all the articles, all the podcasts, everything I went through, I couldn't find like, how did police make that leap? Or is that enough? Just friends saying that, yeah, teenagers are staying at their house and doing drugs and and that's it. And the confidential informant, of course. I don't know. So there's a big question mark there for me. I feel like something is missing. But upon further investigation, several search warrants alleged that Eric and Dee Millerberg had been supplying Alexis with drugs for quite a while in exchange for babysitting and had been engaging in a drug-fueled sexual relationship with Alexis. They apparently provided her drugs, including methamphetamine and heroin, in exchange for her babysitting services, as I just said. And this is what police at this point believe happened, that on the night of Alexis's death, she was at the Millerbergs. They all consumed drugs together, and Alexis died. And instead of seeking medical help, Dee and Eric Millerberg panicked and decided to dispose of Alexis's body rather than seek help. So, really, the bulk of this case, if it feels like, whoa, how'd we get from just like this girl's going babysitting to here? Yes, I agree. Same with me. That's how it felt when I was reading about this. But a big part of this case happens in the courtroom. So we're going to get to that in 1 second. But while awaiting, while in jail, awaiting for further charges, for trial, for everything related to Alexis's death, Eric Millerberg supposedly was bragging to his cellmate about what happened to Alexis. So again, a combination of confidential informant, friends and family saying things, and now this cellmate ends up going to police. But Eric had been bragging to his cellmate about what happened to Alexis. He said he and his wife had both engaged in sexual acts with the girl and that he had injected her with drugs, meth, and heroin into her neck, apparently. And when she overdosed, they did not call for help. They instead let her die. Eric told a member of a gang that he met in jail that he was a watcher of the flock and that he would administer drugs to teenagers that came to him so they wouldn't go elsewhere and try it on their own. Aw, what a nice guy. Really looking out for the teens in his community. In a statement prepared by the apparently the jailmate that Eric shared this with, uh, the man told police that Eric Millerberg talked about giving drugs to Alexis and the sexual acts between the teenager, his wife, and himself. He also told his jailmate that the girl had died at his home and that he couldn't revive her. So this, whether it's his cell, I don't think it was his cellmate, actually. I think it was just a member of this like white Aryan Nation gang that Eric became part of once he got into jail. Good chance he was part of it before he went into jail. But this person that he told this to, Casey Peterson, said, I was paranoid and I did not want to be involved. I have a 16-year-old daughter, which is why he ended up going to, I guess, one of the guards who then went to the police. Not too long after all of this, Eric is awaiting trial, so it's a little while after this. It's July 2013. Eric was stabbed by his actual cellmate more than 20 times. He survived, and his cellmate, Simon Russell Scown, has been charged with attempted murder. The trials. Now, there were to be two separate trials. Eric Millerberg was pleading not guilty to felony child abuse, homicide, and unlawful sex charges. He is facing now life in prison. D. Millerberg, again, I have some conflicting stories here, so I'm going to tell you both. D. Millerberg pleaded guilty to obstructing justice, this is for her earlier crime, acquiring prescription drugs unlawfully, and abuse or desecration of a human body, which were each third-degree felonies. Now, she is granted immunity from anything that she would say in her testimony against her husband. So she's receiving lesser charges, and anything she says that will help put Eric away, it cannot be used against her. So when it comes to Alexis, the only thing that Dee was facing is a single count of abuse or desecration of a human body. And her trial is set to occur after Eric's because her defense attorney says the resolution to her case depends on what happens with his. From the state's perspective, there's leverage there. They want to make sure that they get the testimony from her before they agree to do anything with her case. So they've got to get Eric's trial out of the way. Because at this point, Dee has claimed that she had nothing to do with it. She says that Eric, her husband, intentionally gave Alexis a fatal mix of drugs without her knowledge. I should also note that she did end up filing for divorce from Eric in 2012, which is probably a good move. And before we get into the actual parts of the trial, I just want to kind of paint a picture for you about Eric. So Eric had lots of minor and some not so minor kind of, I really want to say infarctions. I don't know why. I don't even think that's the right word. Infractions. He had been in trouble with the law before. Let's put it that way. And his appearance prior to this trial for the murder of Alexis was kind of scary. He had a ton of tattoos, and I have a ton of tattoos. I don't think tattoos are scary. He's just he's scary looking. I don't know how else to put it. He had a very long, unkept beard, lots of tattoos. He had plenty of silent Aryan warrior tattoos. He had a tattoo on his neck that was partially hidden by the shirt collar. He tried to obviously cover all the tattoos for court. And the tattoo on his neck, it used to say D, D-E-A, D for his wife. And after he found out that she was testifying against him and claiming everything was his fault, he changed that tattoo to say death, which I thought was kind of funny. So his appearance prior to the first day of his trial is rough. It's a little bit aggressive looking, but on the trial, he sported he looks like a very different person. He's completely clean shaven, Collar is covering a lot of the tattoos on his neck, obviously wearing long sleeves. His hair was slicked back. He had glasses on, which none of this is shocking. Obviously, you're going to trial for murder. You want to look as innocent as possible, whatever that might mean to you. So it's not shocking, but when I saw the pictures, it was pretty shocking. So he looks like a normal bro, whereas pictures of him not standing at trial, he looks like somebody I would not want to run into in a dark alley. There were several people who testified at Eric's trial. Dee Millerberg was the prime person who was testifying, and she admitted to lying to both police and anyone who asked her about Alexis's disappearance right up until she was released on bail from jail. So she went for the prescription drugs. She went to jail, but just briefly. She testified that she was terrified of her husband. She described Eric as controlling and manipulative. And she told the court the first time she told the police the truth was December 30th, 2011. She said, quote, "It was time, and I really didn't want her family to keep going through this and not know where she was." Oh, that's so sweet of you, Dee. Like, you've let them go months without knowing what happened to her, and now you've decided, let me clue them in on the awful way which their daughter died. So she admitted that not the night that Alexis died, but other occasions, she had given Alexis drugs, including prescription opiates, heroin, Xanax, and methamphetamine. She had also provided some of these drugs to another girl that Alexis was friends with named Brenna, who will be also testifying. Dee revealed that she and Eric had, in fact, engaged in sexual acts with Alexis, including the night that she disappeared. Dee described one of their kind of more wild nights that happened in August prior to Alexis's death. One of the most wild nights that the group had. So Alexis, Dee, and Eric, and they were having a wild night of drug use. And then Alexis asked, according to Dee, Alexis asked to become sexually involved with the married couple. Dee told the court, "Eric and I started kissing and having sex, and then Alexis jumped in." And I'll be honest, I feel terrible saying these things because not that I think that Alexis's family is going to listen to this, but on the off chance that anyone who knew her did, these are just really difficult things to hear about, your teenage daughter or family member or friend. So I guess I just want to acknowledge that. So Dee then began remembering and recalling what she could from the night of Alexis's death. She admitted that instead of going out to buy a birthday present for her daughter, like they had initially claimed, that's what they had initially told the police. Well, we went out because we were birthday shopping for our daughter. She said that didn't happen, actually, that instead Eric prepared drugs for the three of them. He helped Alexis get high by injecting her with methamphetamine and heroin once, and with heroin once and twice with methamphetamine into her arm and neck. She said they also smoked marijuana and drank alcohol. She said then when Alexis was as high as she had ever been, she and her husband performed oral sex on one another. But then I saw another article that said Alexis and Eric were engaged in a sexual act and that Dee was not involved. She was there, but she was not involved in the sexual act. Dee says that a short while later, the drugs had a negative effect on Alexis, and she kind of started freaking out. She reportedly was feeling disoriented. She was feeling really, really cold. So she asked if she could take a warm bath in Eric and Dee's master bathroom. Dee helped her get set up in the bath and left, allowed Alexis to bathe on her own, came back, checked on her about 45 minutes later. Alexis was still really cold, shivering uncontrollably. So Dee wrapped her in a blanket and told her to lie down in the bedroom. Now, Dee is a former nurse. So she's also a former nurse who's using a lot of drugs. So her judgment is probably off at this point. But as a former nurse, you would think, I don't know, she might have some concern that Alexis is, this isn't the first time they have ever done drugs together. They've done this before, and this hasn't happened. So this seems like it would be concerning, but apparently Dee wasn't concerned. Her and Eric went downstairs and outside to smoke some cigarettes while Alexis laid down. And when they returned a half hour later, Alexis was apparently completely unresponsive. Dee says that she did attempt to revive her, but it was too late. Dee said, quote, she wasn't moving. She had mucousy stuff coming out the side of her mouth. She didn't wake up. Dee said that at this point, they panicked and they thought we better, they were thinking about they would lose their kids, they would go to jail, even though, based on this testimony, it sounds like it was an accident. Now, there was other accounts where I saw that Dee had said Eric intentionally overdosed Alexis. I don't know why that he would have done that though. So I actually do tend to believe that it was not intentional. It doesn't make it any better. This is all absolutely appalling behavior. She's a 16-year-old girl. I think we can all agree on that. However, if they had simply called the police or an ambulance at this point, who knows what could have happened. But they didn't. Dee is at this point giving her testimony. She's crying and she says, we decided police were not going to be called. I dressed Alexis. I wrapped her in a blanket. I had a Foot Locker type box that we put her in and put her in the trunk of the car. Then they put their infant, 9-month-old daughter in the car, left the 6-year-old at home sleeping by herself, and drove off to dispose of their babysitter's 16-year-old body. Dee says they drove all over the place. They wanted to dispose of any evidence that could possibly connect them to the crime. So they left Alexis's body out in that area by the river. Then they put her purse in one dumpster with the box that had held Alexis's body. And then they drove to a different dumpster where they left the carpet from the car in case there was any evidence on it. And I have no idea if this is true or not, but I thought this is an interesting little fact that allegedly, after Dee gave this testimony, Eric put a hit out on his wife from prison. Seems like a really nice guy, So additional people who were part of the prosecution's witness list. An assistant medical examiner named Joseph White testified that Alexis had 7 times the lethal amount of methamphetamine in her system and high levels of morphine and amphetamines, and that likely caused her death. However, this examiner said that he couldn't rule out other possibilities such as strangulation, stabbing, or blunt force trauma because the body was so badly decomposed. Dr. White could not call Alexis's death a homicide. He declared it undetermined. It was also revealed at the trial that the confidential informant, remember, was a man named Eric Peanut Smith, who went to the police 38 days after Alexis went missing and told them that Eric had called him in September and said, I have something I have to get rid of. So Peanut, I'm going to call him Peanut because his first name is the same as Eric Millerberg's and his last name is the same as the county attorney. So that's confusing. So Peanut says that he helped move the body to a more discreet place from where Dee and Eric had originally disposed of the body. So Dee and Eric disposed of the body originally and then had second thoughts, thought it might be too easy to find. And Peanut went with Eric to move the body. So apparently they drove up to Weber Canyon and attempted to dig a hole in which to bury the body, but the ground was too hard. So instead, Peanut held the flashlight while Eric moved the body further away from the dirt roadway. And it turns out that, yes, he did say, like, I wanted the family to have closure. I have a 16-year-old daughter. He was also apparently, along with other members of this Aryan Nation warrior, whatever, racist gang in prison, many of them became disgusted with hearing about Eric's grooming techniques involving these young teenage girls and drugs. And Peanut was one of them. And so he came forward and then his identity was revealed during this trial. Deputy Weber County Attorney Christopher Shaw also testified. He said, quote, he put her in a garbage bag. She died in his home after he injected her with heroin and methamphetamine. That's what the evidence will show. He did nothing to try and save this young girl. He did not call 911. He did not involve the police or call an ambulance. He did not take her to the hospital. He did nothing. He told the jury on Wednesday that medical and toxicology reports revealed large quantities of both methamphetamine, resulting metabolites of heroin in the girl's remaining muscle tissue. He said medical examiners who were scheduled to testify, which I told you about already, so out of order. He said they will tell you that the circumstances of this death are very, very suspicious. Someone else had to be involved. There is no reason for her death. Brenna Kane, Alexis's friend, one of her best friends, she also testified, and she said that Alexis and her had gotten secret drugs, alcohol, and sex from Eric and Dee Millerberg many, many times. She said they would hang out at their house. Sometimes they would all get a hotel room and hang out. The weekend that Alexis was babysitting and subsequently killed, Brenna wasn't with Alexis. She said that was pretty unusual. They usually spent most of their weekends together. So when Brenna said when she hadn't contacted me, I knew something was wrong. I didn't know where she was. She did confront Eric Millerberg about her friend, and he denied knowing where she was. He told her that he would never do anything to hurt them. Apparently, she testified that Eric also taught them how to smoke meth out of a light bulb. I didn't even know that that was a thing. Now, the defense team did not call any witnesses to testify during the trial, and Eric did not take the stand in his own defense. Throughout the entire trial, he sat alongside his attorneys wearing his glasses and suit and tie, and he remained mostly silent and expressionless. No tears, no emotion, nothing. His defense attorney, Randall Marshall, said that while Alexis's death is a terrible tragedy, the fact that she is dead does not make Eric Millerberg guilty of anything. Marshall really didn't hold back. He told the jury that no one has more motivation to lie than Dee Millerberg because she's right up to her neck. And during a heated cross-examination, Marshall aggressively challenged Dee's version of events, trying to convince the jury that she wasn't being entirely truthful. He said Dee Millerberg told a great story, but it doesn't add up. There's no evidence other than Dee's account to prove that Eric Millerberg injected Alexis with the drugs. How do we know that Dee didn't shoot her up? After the jury was dismissed that day, Eric Millerberg was seen mouthing the words, "I'm sorry," to a very emotional Brenna, who was seated in the courtroom. And this disgusts me. All of it does. But he is still trying to maintain some type of, I don't know what, friend. I hate to even use the word friendship. He's still trying to maintain some type of connection with this Brenna, this 16-year-old Brenna, whose best friend was just murdered. What a psychopath. So, closing arguments. The prosecution Smith started closing arguments by showing the jury a picture of a smiling Alexis holding her little sister about 1 year before her death. Then he showed the jury a picture of her dead body covered by a muddy piece of foam in the woods of northern Utah. Smith said the Millerbergs dumped her there and discarded of her like a piece of trash. And then they lied to the police for more than a month about her whereabouts. He said, quote, "Ordinary people don't inject little girls with heroin and methamphetamine. You don't have sex with 16-year-olds when you're a month away from turning 36. You don't look for dates with juniors in high school." No shit. You don't look for date. You're 36. You're looking for dates with high schoolers. Ultimately, and luckily, the Utah jury found Eric Millerberg guilty of child abuse homicide and the death of Alexis. Eric was also found guilty of unlawful sexual conduct with a minor, obstruction of justice, and desecration of a human body. Eric says, "I'm willing to shoulder the responsibility for the role I played and the things I've done, but there's no way it's all mine." His lawyer asked the judge to take into consideration that the death was accidental, saying nobody intended there to be a death. Christopher Shaw shot back at that notion, saying, injecting a teenage girl with methamphetamine and heroin is no accident. He highlighted 20 years of crimes and poor choices made by Millerberg, who has been in and out of jail for years. He said, quote, it's not by chance that Mr. Millerberg ended up here. It's by choice. He also criticized Eric's lack of remorse, saying, I didn't see him blink back one tear. I didn't see him show 1 ounce of emotion. Does he assume any responsibility? Eric is, of course, decided to appeal the conviction, but he was sentenced to serve 5 years to life for child abuse homicide, 1 to 15 years for obstruction of justice, and up to 5 years on unlawful sexual conduct and desecration of a corpse, which feels wrong to me. Up to 5 years for having sex with a 16-year-old? Really? Desecration of a corpse? That's it? And I don't really understand the 5 to life. Uh, like how does that get decided? I don't know. I need more information on that. Now, Dee's trial came several months after Eric's, and she did plead guilty. Dee's attorney asked the judge for probation for Dee, saying that she had been off drugs for 3 years since Alexis's death. Oh my God. Congratulations. You've been off drugs for 3 years. No jail time for you then, even though you've been supplying drugs and having sex with minors. What? Dee wasn't in prison during this time leading up to her trial. So she was off drugs. She moved to Wyoming to live with her aunt, and she regained custody of her children, which to me is mind blowing. Mind blowing. I understand she says that she didn't inject Alexis. Fine. But you were there. It was your home. You gave her drugs on multiple occasions. You openly admitted to having sex with her. What do you mean you got custody of your kids back? It blows my mind. Her attorney tried to explain that Dee had an unstable mother and started drinking at age 13 and later turned to drugs. She was also abused by Eric and by a previous husband. She never finished high school, but she still managed to earn a nursing degree and buy a house. And to me, it's just blah, blah. Fuck that. Are you kidding? Do you know how many people have unstable parents, or how many people start drinking at 13 years old and don't end up providing fatal drugs to teenagers and having sex with them? It's just I don't know how her lawyer lives with themselves after saying those things. But a state judge sentenced her to 5 years in prison, calling the crime heinous and depraved. The judge said she lost all her common sense and was not in a position to help Alexis when she needed her the most. He said he would have leveled a harsher penalty if not for a plea deal prosecutors agreed to after Dee testified against her husband. So really awesome that she testified against her husband. Nonetheless, literally no one knows. This woman could be just as guilty, and she served 5 years. Apparently, during a 2015 parole hearing, she told the parole board, I feel like I do deserve to be here. And she was denied parole. She was denied parole again in 2017. But in, I believe, 2018, when she was 45 years old, she was granted parole after meeting the requirements for early release. She was not scheduled to be released until 2019. I'm speechless, obviously. I just cannot understand. I understand wanting her testimony, but a 5 year plea agreement, it feels wrong. It all feels wrong. I mean, Alexis was only 16 years old. She had her whole life ahead of her. She should still be here. And what happened to her was preventable. It was really senseless, and it was a huge betrayal of trust by the, adults that should have been looking out for her and not doing what they did. So I think this case is a very good reminder that sometimes the people we think we can trust are not always who they seem, unfortunately. And also that bad people don't always look bad. Like these were, neighbors in a suburb with two young daughters. They didn't necessarily look like monsters. I do think Eric was kind of scary looking, but Dee is just looks like a regular old run of the mill mom. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean she didn't look like a murderer. Put it that way. So thoughts and prayers go out to Alexis's friends and family. And that is it for today's episode, guys. As always, please subscribe, leave a review. And I love getting case suggestions. I've gotten a few lately, so please keep sending those. And until next time, I hope you all stay safe. I love you. And I will be back tomorrow with a mini crime story for you. And thank you for listening. Bye, guys.
Death by Southwest is hosted by Jenna Schneider and Margot Carmichael.
Executive produced by Margot Carmichael.
Produced by Jenna Schneider.
Audio editing and sound design by Margot Carmichael.
Music by Soundstripe.
And a special thanks to Edward R. Murrow for letting us borrow his famous sign-off phrase, "Good night and good luck."